1980s, horror was everywhere. Freddy was cracking jokes in your dreams, Jason was chopping up summer camps, and Michael Myers was quietly haunting the suburbs. The shelves of every costume store were lined with masks, machetes, and enough fake blood to make a butcher blush. But by 1987, the formula was showing cracks. Sequels were repeating themselves, critics were yawning, and fans were wondering if horror had lost its edge. And then came something very different. Something that didn't stalk babysitters or camp counselors. Something that promised pleasure and delivered pain. That something was Hellraiser. Our story begins with Liverpool-born playwright and author Clive Barker. By the mid-80s, Barker was already known in the horror world. His books of blood and short stories have been hailed by Stephen King, who declared, "I have seen the future of horror, and his name is Clive Barker." But Hollywood didn't seem to agree. Barker's first two adaptations, Underworld and Rawhide Rex, turned his twisted tales into laughable schlock. Rawhide Rex in particular is still whispered about in horror circles, usually with laughter. So, Barker decided if they couldn't get it right, he'd just do it himself. He would direct, and his novella, The Hellbound Heart, a gothic tale of romance, obsession, and a puzzle box that opens the gates of hell, would be his ticket. Filming started in 1986, primarily in a house in Dollis Hill, London. The budget?
$1 million.
That's less than Freddy's glove budget by Dream Warriors. But there was a catch. The financiers, New World Pictures, wanted the film to feel American. So they redubbed much of the dialogue with American accents and left the geography deliberately vague. Is it London? Is it New York? Who knows? It's generic horror town. Barker was a first-time director, but he surrounded himself with talent. Bob Keane and his effects crew were magicians with latex and wax and buckets of stage blood. The effects team gave us some of horror's most unforgettable images. Frank's resurrection, created by pouring melted wax, reversing the footage, and making it look like flesh bubbling up from underneath the floorboards. A literal reverse meltdown. Skinless Frank, for example. Sean Chapman played Frank in full form, but when he came back without skin, it was actor Oliver Smith, who spent hours in a chair covered in prosthetics that made even the seasoned crew members gag. Chains and hooks, the signature Cenobite weapon. Fishing hooks never looked scarier. And the Cenobites themselves, designed with influences from Catholicism, punk fashion, and the underground S&M clubs of London. Barker said he wanted them to look like magnificent super butchers. Well, he nailed it. The Cenobites weren't demons in the traditional sense. Barker called them explorers of the further regions of experience. They didn't hunt you, you called them. Dark Bradley, a longtime friend of Barker, was given a choice. Play a background mover in one scene or play the lead Cenobite. A guy in the corner with a sofa or a nightmare priest with nails hammered into his skull.
But choose wisely.
He almost chose the mover. Imagine horror history if he had. Though Barker called him lead Cenobite, marketing execs thought that was boring. Fans dubbed him Pinhead, and the name stuck. Barker hated it, but you know what? Lead Cenobite doesn't move t-shirts. Bradley later admitted that the makeup nearly broke him. Hours in the chair, glued under the prosthetics, sweating under the hot lights. But when he looked in the mirror, he knew it was worth it. Of course, no horror movie of the 80s was complete without a censorship fight. The MPAA demanded less of Frank's hooks and tearing in the flesh, less Julia and Frank doing, Julia and Frank things, and generally less of the whips and chains aesthetic. Even after cuts, Hellraiser carried an X rating in the UK until even further edits were made. Ironically, that only fueled its legends. Fans whispered about lost footage, Some swore the missing scenes were worse than anything ever shown. In truth, most of it was just a few extra seconds of gore. But hey, horror thrives on rumor. Hellraiser was released in September 1987 and earned about $14.6 million worldwide. Not blockbuster numbers, but with $1 million budget, it was a bloody good return. Where the movie really found its audience was VHS rentals. The cover art, Pinhead's pale face, holding the glowing puzzle box, was unmissable. Kids too young to rent it would just stare at the cover in awe. Older teens dared each other to bring it home. That box on the shelf was practically a rite of passage. Critics split right down the middle. Roger Ebert called it a bankruptcy of imagination. Meanwhile, Fangoria and horror fans hailed it as a bold, twisted reinvention of the genre. Now let's talk about that ending. The house burns, the box is restored, and then out of nowhere, a skeletal dragon swoops in, grabs the box, and flies away. It's weird, surreal, and feels like it belongs in a different movie. Why? Because it was thrown together in a single weekend. Barker had wanted to do a grander, more apocalyptic ending, but time and money were just gone. So Bob Keene's team cobbled together a stop-motion puppet, animated it frame by frame, and blended it in with a miniature fire effect. It was a crash course in Harryhausen-style animation, done at breakneck speed just to have something to cap the film. And honestly, that rush job made it unforgettable. It's awkward, it's clunky, but it feels like a nightmare, like a last-minute twist just before you wake up. Horror born from desperation. And the lightning effects and animation, again, done over a drunken weekend by Barker himself, because they needed the effects and they just didn't have anyone to do it. So he said, darn it, I'll do it myself. The success meant sequels, and oh boy did we get them. Hellbound Hellraiser 2, released in 1988, expanded the mythology. We saw Leviathan, the god of hell. We learned that Cenobites were once human, and Julian came back meaner than ever. Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, was released in 1992. Pinhead took center stage, almost Freddy-like. The setting moved to nightclubs. Results? Mixed. Hellraiser Bloodline, released in 1996. This was the first Hellraiser film I ever saw, and my friends and I went to go see it on opening night, and we were the only ones there. This was Pinhead in space. The production was so chaotic that the director even had his name taken off. What we got was a heavily cut mess. During the 2000s, we had the direct-to-video era. Inferno, Hellseeker, Deader, Hellworld, and Revelations. Many weren't even written as Hellraiser films. Pinhead was just awkwardly dropped in. Imagine being a guest star in your own franchise. Through it all, though, Doug Bradley, his aristocratic menace, held things together. Then in 2022, Hellraiser returned, this time on Hulu. Directed by David Bruckner, the Cenobites were redesigned with flesh sculpted into their clothing, and Pinhead was reimagined by Jamie Clayton, whose performance brought an eerie elegance closer to Barker's original vision in the Hellbound heart. It wasn't a slasher flick. It was once again about bargains, temptations, and the cost of desire. Fans held it as the most faithful adaptation since the original. Today, Hellraiser is more than a horror movie. It's a cultural artifact. The lament configuration is as iconic as Freddy's glove or Jason's mask. The Cenobite designs influence goth and industrial subcultures, inspiring bands, fashion, and art. And Pinhead stands apart from the other villains. Freddy invades dreams. Jason stalks the woods. Michael haunts the suburbs. Pinhead, he waits for you to invite him. That makes him scarier. At its core, Hellraiser is about temptation. Frank wanted more. Julia wanted passion. Kirsty wanted answers. And the Cenobites simply gave them what they asked for. That's why nearly 40 years later, that little brass box still holds its power. It isn't just a prop, it's a contract, a trap disguised as a gift. And when it opens, the words will always be the same. What is your pleasure, sir? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That was, yeah. I'm never doing that again. Well, guys, I hope you really enjoyed that little retrospective. And if you liked what you saw, please give me that thumbs up. And if you did not like what you see, please give me that thumbs up, because why should we both be disappointed? I would also like to add that I'm just a hobbyist. I do this for fun. I do not upload on a regular basis. So please, Momo! Now, as I was saying before I so rudely interrupted, please don't forget to like and subscribe, share this video with your friends, and remember, guys, you cannot take it with you, so please give the gift of life. It's very important. Make sure you're an organ donor. And with that, remember, stay spooky.